and that disciplinary action should be taken against the individuals. I say this because of my understanding of the last four terms of references. It is submitted that the evidence received by this commission does not support any presumption that the investigation was less than diligent and that there were individual or systemic failures within the police force. In this sense, the inquiry is based on a false premise. The facts are that the major crimes unit of the Guyana Police Force were assigned to investigate this Gillard report. It is submitted that this unit is the premier investigative unit of the country. The major crimes unit is highly trained and highly effective unit and under the direct command and daily supervision of the crime chief of Guyana. The unit is used as a tool to address investigations of high importance and possess jurisdictional powers superior to any other unit or division of the Guyana Police Force. I would submit that it is to the credit of the crime chief, Blanham, that he dedicated the investigating of the Gillard report to this unit and also involved all of the senior officers of the very unit. The activity log submitted, which activity log has not been questioned in any way. That activity log details the diligence of the unit with regards to the investigation, and it is also clear that all investigative steps were informed at all times by continuous advice from the police legal advisor. The fact that so much time and energy was taken up with a report of such dubious credibility speaks volumes of the understanding by the Guyana Police Force that any plot to harm a head of state has to be thoroughly investigated, no matter how ridiculous the reports. And I wish to expand on this because, in essence, this report was sort of in the same vein of a cold case, relating back to an event that took place 21 months before. So while this sort of report demands a thorough investigation, frankly speaking, I would submit that it did not require any urgency. 21 months had passed, no attempts had been made on the life of the president. So I would submit that a thorough investigation was needed, but there was no urgency. There was no crime scene to protect, no evidence to collect. We knew who the suspect was. So I would submit that what was needed was a thorough rather than an urgent investigation, like all cold cases are approached. I wish to submit that irrespective of whether Mr. Silal Pasado or Mr. David Ramnarayan was on duty as the police commissioner, or whether Mr. Blanham or Mr. Das was on duty as the crime chief, the investigations were and continue to be diligently and properly conducted. There is evidence, however, as to what may have resulted in the false premise upon which this inquiry is based. The baseless opinions and ill-informed reports by David Ramnarayan to the political directorate could evidently result in a perception that something was amiss in the investigations. It is yet to be determined whether those reports were actuated by malice and or a burning desire to ingratiate himself and diminish others for his personal ambitions, or simply incompetence. We've heard evidence that when he ran to the State House to brief the president, he was only aware of one statement that was taken, while the fact of the matter is there were 3 statements taken. This is why I'm not making these allegations wildly. There is evidence that he was ill-informed at the time that he was making his first brief to the head of state. In evidence, he himself said that he's no expert in investigations, he has no practical experience, no proper training in investigative techniques. And that is why I'm saying that his opinions were baseless and ill-informed when he gave reports to the political directorate. As a matter of fact, a lot has been said about the interventions of my client, Mr. Silal Prasad, during the 29th of March 2017, and whether those interventions, I suppose, were proper is something that this commission may look at. But when you consider the interventions of my client, I think it is helpful to have a sense of what was happening between my client and Mr. David Ramnarine before that. It is clear that Mr. Silal Prasad and probably Mr. Blanham, that both of them had made serious allegations against Mr. David Ramnarine before, having to do with interference with the murder investigation, the issuance of gun licenses, and so on. The fact that the Commissioner of Police was on leave, and even though on leave still made those calls, may reflect more a lack of confidence in the person who was holding the chair, rather than any intention to meddle. Mr. Prasad himself has said to us that it is normal for him, while on leave, to pay this type of attention by reporting whenever complaints are made to him and so on. But I wish to add that it is very likely that Mr. Prasad may not have had any confidence in Mr. Ramnarine, especially given the reports and the serious allegations he had made not so long before this. So I'm hoping that when you assess him being on leave and making those calls, that you take that into consideration. As a matter of fact, I believe that this whole issue of those calls being made is a red herring. I don't see how making a call and speaking of bail, either by instruction or suggestion, I fail to see how that falls into any of the terms of reference of this commission. This commission has to examine whether it was a failure, a neglect, or an omission to thoroughly and properly investigate. Whether he made the call or not, I would submit, had absolutely no effect on whether there was any failure, neglect, or omission to thoroughly investigate. I think it's a red herring, and I think it will lead us up the garden path rather than up the path to enlightenment. And that brings an end to my submissions.
I would comment that you're a man of your word, because you did say that when Mr. Chan is finished, you might not have much to say. So.
Your name is Slowe, he's short.
Mr. Ram, you go now? Or?
I'll ask to be excused. I have pressing duties elsewhere, please.
That's okay. Thanks for your attendance this morning and your contribution.
Thank you so much.
And just to say, before you leave, that your submissions will certainly be taken into consideration in the putting together of the report.
I'm grateful
like
for that.
All other submissions.
Well, I'm happy for the opportunity to address in public, and I'm hoping that whenever you make your recommendations and come to your findings, that those are also made public.
Well, that is not for me. That is not for me to decide.
Yes, But I'm still hopeful.
Well, perhaps we all are, but that is not.
Because I think it would be a shame for all of this to be conducted in public. And then what happens is kept a secret. I don't think that would be.
I think you rightly said it's not for your decision.
It's not for me to decide.
You could recommend, but you can't decide.
Well, I'm not even sure that it's proper for me to recommend
Yeah,
that aspect of
yeah,
it.
I think it's.
But we'll see where it goes. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Hanoman.
Yes.
I undertake to submit in writing what I've just said
Please do,
by
please do.
midday.
But okay, fine. That's fine. That is fine with me. That will be fine with me, Mr. Hanoman.
Thank you so much, sir. I had hoped to do it before, but I wasn't able to.
And I'm hopeful too that our transcriptionists will have captured that and perhaps simultaneously.
Well, that would be helpful to me, sir.
Yeah, so we will see how that goes. Well, I'm still looking forward to your written submission.
Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome. Yeah, Mr. Peters?
Good morning, Mr. Slowe. I'm representing Mr. Chase. Mr. Slowe, before I begin my submissions, I wanted to say something very important to you.
Please do.
You're the first commission of inquiry that have Mr. Ram, Mr. Hanoman, and I sitting together, and neither Mr. Ram nor Mr. Hanoman walked out for one reason or the other. The last two commissions of inquiry, Mr. Hanoman took his leave and wasn't there for closing arguments for some reason, and Mr. Ram likewise in prison inquiry. So there must have been some magic